All right, and we're back for another episode of Black Life Amplified. It's the virtual town hall series hosted by the African American Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany L. Wright with Insight News. And before we get started, I just want to give a very special thank you to our sponsors, which include the Minneapolis Foundation, Northpoint Health and Wellness, and Children's Minnesota for making this town hall possible. I also want to give a very special thank you to our community partner organizations, which include Northpoint Health and Wellness, Children's Minnesota, Insight News, Gray Matter, the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, and Minnesota Community Care. I want everyone to make sure that you visit the African American Leadership Forum Facebook page, as well as the YouTube channel, to watch previous episodes of Black Life Amplified. And then, of course, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on all future episodes. So today's episode, we're focused on politics and activism, similar to some of our previous episodes, but this time we're focused on one politician in particular. We're going to be taking a deep dive into what's happening in the city of St. Paul by speaking to the mayor of St. Paul, Mr. Melvin Carter. But up first, we're going to do a quick COVID-19 update with Adriene Thornton from Children's Minnesota. So Adriene, welcome back. How are you doing?
Good morning, Brittany. I am doing well. Thank you for having me yet again. I could be doing better if people would get vaccinated, but I'm making it over here.
Yeah, things are starting to look a little bit scary again for me. And so I want to ask you, I saw a graphic on CNN that really concerned me and made me wonder, are we kind of headed back towards another shutdown possibly? Producers, I don't know if you're able to pull that graphic up or not, but it's showing the rates of transmission across the United States, red being really high transmission, blue being low, and then the yellows are kind of in between. It's a lot of red going on.
There's a lot of red going on. And the interesting thing is, if you were to take the vaccination, a map of everyone vaccinated, and overlay it on this map, the areas where you're seeing all the red have the highest rate of non-vaccination as well. So that is really the biggest problem we're experiencing now, is people not wanting to get vaccinated. We reached in Minnesota 70% of the population being vaccinated. But if you get a little more granular into the data, you will see that we have pockets of non-vaccination. So for instance, I live in Dakota County. Our rates are wavering between 66 and 68% of people vaccinated. So that's 40% of people, and that's age eligible people. So that's everyone who is age eligible to get the vaccine, not the kids who can't get it yet. We're not even including them in the numbers yet. These are just people who qualify by age to get the vaccine. That's 40% of them walking around, potentially being exposed to COVID, potentially getting COVID, potentially spreading COVID. That is a lot of people. And as you move further away from the Twin Cities and get more into the rural areas, you will notice that non-vaccination rate goes up. So as we have people continuing to gather together, travel in and out of the cities, we're going to start to see more transmission as well. And it will likely go up once the kids go back to school.
So that was, going to be my next question about, do we need to start kind of shifting some of our behaviors again, the way that we did, a year ago plus, right? So that same CNN source also said that, if you're unvaccinated, it is unsafe to eat at restaurants or drink at bars, things of that nature. Should we start rolling back, even for those of us who are vaccinated, should we start rolling back some of our behaviors just because the numbers are kind of getting out of hand again?
Well, here's the thing, Brittany. The CDC published guidelines, and basically what they said was, if you're vaccinated, you can go to restaurants and to events and not wear a mask. If you are unvaccinated, you should continue to wear your mask, and even around vaccinated people, maintain social distance, do your hand hygiene. The problem we're having now is people aren't following that. They are doing whatever they want to do. And I know this for a fact because I've been into different businesses, and I've seen a child who was not old enough to get vaccinated ask their parent, "Hey, mom, don't I need to wear a mask?" And the parent said, "No, you don't have to wear a mask anymore." And I'm thinking, well, that child isn't old enough to be vaccinated, and you're allowing them not to wear a mask. My guess is you're not vaccinated either, and you're also not wearing a mask. What does that do to our community? It increases the spread. And so, if people would just follow the guidelines as they're published, we wouldn't have these issues. But it's clear that people aren't. So, what will most likely happen is we're going to have more restrictions in place. I don't think we're going to get to the point where we have a full shutdown of the world like we did before, but we will have to go back to mandating mask wearing for all because, again, the vaccine is not 100%. It protects you from severe illness and from death related to COVID 19. It doesn't prevent you from getting it, and we're not certain that it prevents you from transmitting it to others. So the transmission rates are going to continue to go up as long as we have people who are not vaccinated circulating through the community without a mask on and spreading it from person to person.
So, with this Delta variant that's out, we know that it is a stronger iteration of the COVID-19 virus that swept through our world last year. Does that mean there's like multiple strains of COVID happening, or is anyone that tests positive is assumed that they have contracted the Delta variant?
No, there are different variants of the virus circulating. When people get tested for COVID, they actually test to see which variant they are infected with. And so that is why we know the number of people that are infected with the Delta variant. And you're absolutely right. It is much, much more virulent than the initial strain of COVID 19, but that's not unusual. We see that with all viruses, they mutate over time. And the way you mute that mutation so that they don't get stronger and stronger is by putting in measures to stop transmission. And so that is another reason why vaccine is so important because if we don't stop the transmission of the Delta variant that's circulating now, it's going to continue to mutate. And as it mutates, it gets stronger, it gets more transmissible, and we're going to see more issues with people getting severely ill and dying from the Delta variant or a variant of that Delta variant. And so vaccine is the one way we know that the vaccines that we're administering now in the US, the Janssen vaccine, the Pfizer, the Moderna, they have all proven effective against the Delta variant in terms of severe illness and death, which is what we expected. The problem is we have so many people that aren't vaccinated that the Delta variant just spreads like wildfire. And so we really need people to start getting vaccinated as soon as they can so that we can stop the transmission before our kids go back to school.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying to think about. My daughter is sick and actually had to get tested for COVID a few days ago. Thankfully, she wasn't COVID positive, but RSV is going around and croup and a few other things. So I think now is a really good moment for everyone within the family, not just the kids, but the parents as well. Just make sure you're washing your hands. Everybody's washing their hands, wearing a mask, and I just can't imagine a version of COVID being worse than what we've already experienced and seeing the devastation that it had on our communities and across our country and across the world. The idea that it is mutating and becoming more powerful is really frightening. And then when you look at the map that we showed earlier, and you're seeing, especially in the southern belt of our country, where again, people who look like us live in high population in those areas. And so it makes me wonder, but we're still in summer, it's summer vacation. Would you say that it's safe to travel right now?
It's safe to travel, but again, you have to recognize the safeguards and put them all in place. So, for instance, I am going to take my daughter to London in August, and we are all fully vaccinated. She is vaccinated, my son is vaccinated, but we've never stopped masking. The only time I don't mask is when I'm outdoors and I'm able to, spread out from people if I feel like, there may be some danger of transmission. But I've never stopped wearing my mask indoors because I don't know who's vaccinated and who isn't, and it's just a risk that I'm not willing to take. So as long as people are maintaining their social distance, wearing their mask and doing their hand hygiene, then the risk of transmission goes down exponentially. And it's just very important for everybody to recognize that it takes all of us to stop this from occurring. and to stop the transmission of this Delta variant. You know, it probably would not be a bad idea to limit your travel, because the more we travel, the more likely we are to spread it if we happen to asymptomatically have it and carry it with us. But depending on where you're traveling, a lot of places are asking you to get tested before you enter into their countries or their states. And so if you know before you go that you are testing positive, then that is a good indication that you should stay home. And a lot of the airlines are allowing you to make changes to your travel plans. If you are traveling with your family, traveling by car is a better option because you all live together. If there is COVID being transmitted, it has already occurred. So we're back to our bubble is where we are. We have our bubbles.
Got it.
Stay in your bubble as
Yeah.
much as you can. And when you're moving around, move around with your bubble. You know,
Yeah.
don't add to the bubble. Don't enter somebody else's bubble, but stay within your bubble until we can get more people vaccinated.
Okay, well, that's a helpful framework, I think, for parents who are, planning play dates and barbecues and things like that.
Mhm.
Time to go back to the pot, and I think that's a great strategy for minimizing COVID. Well, Adriene, I'm very jealous because I didn't get an invite to London, but I wish you both safe travels, and thank you so much for everything that you do. We'll have to talk on another episode about some new things that you'll be doing in the future. But the work as an infection preventionist and nurse is so critical in this time, and we just can't thank you enough for your contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So coming up next, we are going to have a very special guest. As I mentioned earlier, the mayor of St. Paul is with us, Mayor Melvin Carter. So Mayor Carter, welcome to Black Life Amplified.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to join you on this conversation.
It's great, super great to have you and great to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you in at least a year. It was hard to tell time with COVID, right?
That's right, without a doubt.
It's been such a crazy year at that. So we've got the pandemic going on, and then we had this uprising, right? That didn't just impact Minneapolis, but it impacted St. Paul as well. So before we even get into the politics and all of the things, first and foremost, just like, how are you? How is your spirit? How are you handling the weight of this moment?
Oh, look, I appreciate the question. It has definitely been a weighty moment, and we've seen that through over and over again over the past year. I'm fortunate that I have an incredible family around me, between my wife, my children, my parents, obviously, who a lot of I know people watching know. We have, I think, the most incredible team that's ever run any city hall in the face of the planet right now, who's been helping. And we've got a great community who steps forward every chance that they can. And so between having a lot of work having a lot of help with the work, and having the opportunities to sort of kind of zoom out and go for a run or do some exercise or do some of that stuff that I need to focus on my own kind of stability and sustainability of the work, I'm doing pretty well.
I'm glad you said that, focusing on your own sustainability. I think it's really easy as a leader to forget that, to get so swept up in the stuff. And you're not just running an organization, it's an entire city, that you're responsible for, and a family and all of those things. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Right.
I remember right before you launched your campaign to become mayor, there was a gathering at your parents' house with a bunch of community members, and you were talking about, your goals and your objectives and what you wanted to accomplish, and your commitment to continuing to be a public leader who just leads with excellence and all of those things. And I have to give you your flowers and say, I feel like you've been doing it,
I appreciate you saying that.
Really, it's not easy working publicly, and we don't always know what goes behind the scenes, but we got 15 now, minimum wage is up to $15 an hour. You've tripled free rec center programs.
Yep.
You eliminated the library debt, which I think some of my debt was in there. So thank you.
That's right.
So if you keep your library books a little bit longer, that's okay. We want people utilizing the libraries because it's a public service, right?
That's right.
Things like that matter. Also, you represented Rondo on the Breakfast Club.
Right.
I don't think I know of any other mayor from Minnesota who's done that, you know?
You know what, Brittany? One, I'm really, really proud of like the pace that we've driven, all the work from all the things you just described to creating our college savings accounts initiative that starts every child born in our city with $50 in college savings accounts, to the guaranteed income pilot that we launched this past fall that's providing a cohort of low-income families with very young children with a cash payment of $500 a month, unconditional, to just benefit their family. You know, a lot of times we provide public benefits, but we do them like in this very patronizing sort of way that says, here's some money, but you can only spend it on food, or you can only spend this on childcare. When families really know what they need, and when we give families and parents the ability to leverage the resources they have access to be able to kind of develop that, you know, that's the highest and best way we can use kind of public resources. It's really incredible to me, particularly with that policy, the extent to which people like got angry about it, right? Like these are families with young children in a pandemic. And meanwhile, we're fine with giving all kinds of money to businesses, which is good. Our businesses need our support, but somehow when we say we're gonna help low-income families just put food on the table, people get angry. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I learned from that is one of the biggest critiques that we got from that policy, Brittany, was people who say, well, how are you gonna keep these resources from getting people kicked off of their state and their federal benefits that you have to have an income to qualify for? And so we did have to create a platform so people can see what impact. And there were a handful of people who declined to participate in that program because of that. And that's the problem. The problem isn't that we're helping people feed their children. The problem is that we have these like complex systems of state and federal benefits eligibility criteria that actually disincentivizes, prevents families from being able to get a little bit more money to help feed their children. That's not just about our guaranteed income pilot. That's about taking a raise at work or taking a promotion at work, when we all know those families who say, I can't take a promotion because I'll lose my housing benefits, right? That is, when we talk about structural inequity, when we talk about structural poverty, when we talk about structural racism, that is a perfect example of the revolving door that keeps people stuck in poverty, and we're taking those things on. All that to say, though, there are many of my friends for whom, no matter what we do politically speaking, no matter what policies we pass, no matter how high we raise the minimum wage, they'll go, yeah, but you were on Breakfast Club. That's the coolest thing.
Hey, it matters because, you know, we need the policies passed, and we also need to be reminded and affirmed that our culture matters, you know, and it's not often that we have a mayor of a major city, and especially the city I'm from and born and raised in, and so many other people that looks like us and is also from that community and who also loves hip hop and all of those things. So yes, we do have to give you, you know, your kudos for both. And it was
had a good time. We had a good time in the studio.
Yeah, it was a really great interview. It's one of those things where it's like I'm proud to be from here, not just because of the visibility of that moment, but because there were so many great things that you got to point back to that are happening in the city, right? So one thing that's happening in the city that I'm like, that surprised me. This is a unique decision that I wouldn't have anticipated that you made, was about the Lattice housing development. So for context for our audience, Lattice Housing is a $57 million residential development project that's slated to be in Lexington, essentially Lexington and University. Frogtown Neighborhood Association, other community leaders expressed concerns about this housing development, not because they didn't want development, but we want development without displacement, right? That's like the Frogtown Neighborhood Association motto. And at that time, the pricing structure would have outpriced most residents within that geography. So folks that are currently living in the community wouldn't be able to move in. If you look at the median household income, it just wouldn't serve. And then, of course, there's the question of, do property taxes go up, and will people who are living in homes have to move? So City Council actually voted against this development happening, and then you vetoed it and said, no, we should move forward. So I have to ask, what made you say, like, no, we should move forward with it anyway?
I'll tell you, we could spend the rest of this whole time on reasons that we had to move that forward. One is because we actually didn't have the legal authority to block it. If that developer had sued us, our city attorney was looking at me and saying, I don't really know how we defend this in court. because we didn't really have the legal basis to be able to do that. If you own a property in St. Paul or any city in the country, and there's the underlying zoning which says here's the things you can and cannot build on that parcel.
Mhm.
If you want to build something there that meets the underlying zoning, we actually don't want government that can say, no, I don't want you to be able to build there.
Right.
We have a long history of that, and it hasn't worked well for Black people. It hasn't worked well
Exactly.
for people of color in our community. And so that's something we sort of had to reject. The next thing I have to know is our community is growing so fast. St. Paul is at an all-time high population right now, and we have 2 decades of growth in front of us. And I'll tell you, the quickest route to displacement is if we fail to build housing. If we don't build housing at the pace that people are moving in our community, then that means every time somebody moves in, somebody has to move out. There
Right.
are people of higher incomes moving into our community. That's happening, and our community members are losing bidding wars for those apartments, for those homes. And so, building more units, building more market rate units, building more units at every point along the income spectrum. It's not as cool as just saying, no, we don't want this project.
Yeah.
But if we're really thinking about the long term, we need market rate units, because one of the reasons we don't have enough low income units is because there's somebody who can afford a market rate unit, can't find that unit. Well, then they go into an affordable unit, and then there ends up becoming
Somebody
a
else
push
out.
down effect,
Yeah.
and that contributes to the scarcity. The other piece that we have to know, for those of us who are concerned about property taxes raising, is the cost of everything is going up. Our population is growing, so the bills of running the government are going to continue to go up. And the only way in that context that we keep our property taxes stable is to expand our tax base in our city. We're fortunate that we have a lot of opportunity to expand tax base citywide. From the Highland Bridge, the former Ford plants in Highland, to Hillcrest Golf Course on the east side, to everything in between, all the opportunity we have on University Avenue. And this is why we've approached this with kind of a big vision, to say this is about a big long-term vision that includes both financing for affordable units and the type of policies that we need in place to prevent the displacement and discrimination that happens too often as housing markets thrive. But it's got to be a long-term thing. If we find ourselves trying to demand that every single project meet every single possible goal that we can kind of imagine, then we won't build anything. And that's actually one of the worst things that could happen for our neighborhood, for our community. And finally, the last reason I'll share, for now at least, is that we have the ability, and I would love to have this conversation with the city council, to create a policy that says whenever you build new housing in St. Paul, some percentage of them have to be affordable. That's called an inclusionary zoning policy, right? The city council has not made that rule. And so to deny a project, to reject a project, because it does not conform to a rule that the city council has not yet made, it would be sort of like our kids' teachers failing them a class for missing a question that wasn't on the study guide that they never
Right.
taught. And so we have to do good governance. We have to do responsible governance. We have to build our community forward. And if we don't, we'll risk not being able to bring in the types of developers, not being able to bring the types of investment that our children, our families, our businesses really do deserve.
Definitely. So you would be in favor of course, we're going to need the support of the St. Paul City Council, but you yourself as the mayor would be in favor of there being a policy that mandates, X percentage needs to be Section 8 housing within a lattice or other future developments, just to make sure that there are low-income families that can get into these newer spaces?
I think it's important for us to have the conversation. I don't often say, yes, I'd support this, or no, I wouldn't support that before the actual policy is written, for obvious reasons, because the devil ends up really being in the details of how we create those policies. I will tell you that we're working very hard with our city council to, one, put historic and unprecedented amounts of money into helping develop the affordable units, because the problem at Lattice really isn't a problem of will. That developer is willing to put whatever kind of affordable units we can figure out how to fund. The problem is a function of financing. It's a problem of finding the resources to be able to do that. I know you have a lot of business owners who are who are listening right now, who, when they create a product, they have to sell that product at a price that covers their expenses. Housing is the exact same way. And when we, as a kind of government, say, well, we have some policy goals, we need you to kind of do more affordable units and things like that. If we ask people to engage a business model that loses money they won't take us up on that, right? And so we have to figure out how to find the resources to be able to make sure the underlying math of it works. For me as mayor to just say we need more affordable housing, it doesn't help anybody if I'm not actively finding the funding approaches. So I think the conversation that we're having right now would require resources to be able to actually operationalize in a way that adds affordable housing in our community and not just contracts opportunities. But I think that is a centerpiece of the conversation we have to be having right now, and we are having that with our city council.
Awesome. And speaking of development, you and I have been in similar rooms on another development project happening in St. Paul called Reconnect Rondo.
Yes.
So we're actually both products of the Rondo community, and our families have been in the community for years. My great grandmother lost her house on I-94, and there was this organization that was formed out of the Friendly Streets Initiative that became Reconnect Rondo, who had this moonshot vision to put a lid or a cap on
Yes.
I-94 to give about a football field worth of space, give or take, of land back to the community where a big part of Rondo was taken away all of these years ago. It's a really powerful concept and has the potential to be a model of reparative development that could be modeled in other parts of the country. I consulted on the project. You've come and spoke at some of the community engagement events. It seemed like things were going really well. And then things pivoted a little bit. You know, I moved away. I'm not sure how engaged you stayed in the process.
Well, that's the problem. You moved away. That's what
I
what
know.
happened.
I wouldn't say, I moved away for some reasons, but I'm back. I am back. And, I would say Keith Baker and a few other staff members reached out to me before I even came back, asking me to reconsult on the project. We were ready. Contract, it was signed. All my team member had to do was send it. And we ended up having to push pause on it because I got so many phone calls from community members expressing concern about my alignment with the project. And we hadn't even signed the contract.
Mm-hmm.
This was based off of a photo op from like 4 years ago.
Right.
And they're like, wait a minute, what's going on? We haven't been engaged. We have no idea what's going on. And now there's an entity that's called Preserve Rondo, that exists that wants to make sure that there's a measure of accountability for community and that descendants of Rondo also get first priority in benefiting from the land bridge, which I think is very valid. Are you aware of like the list of demands that's been made?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And actually, I think this is a space where I think the intent of everybody involved in this conversation is really the same.
It's valid, yes.
Yeah. And I think actually the best thing, I think some of these community concerns are probably the best thing that can happen for the project long term, because that's community members who are engaged, who are passionate, where it's stimulated this really, I think, compelling multi-generational conversation, cross-generational conversation, even within our Rondo community, that I think is very important. And so, I don't see that as necessarily a problem for the project. I'll tell you, when in my team and with my staff, when we're doing something that's major, when we're doing something that is like potentially transformational, if nobody in the room is disagreeing, if nobody in the room is pushing back and saying, what about this? And if we tried that, then we can be pretty sure we're probably not fielding our best and brightest kind of concepts and ideas. So I actually think it's healthy. I think it's an opportunity. I think there's a lot of growth to be found for the project and for our community within that kind of critique and criticism, and specifically within our ability to kind of engage in relationship with one another beyond that level of critique. And I know between federal and state sources, Reconnect Rondo has started to gain some traction and gain some success in terms of being able to have resources. I hope you take that contract because I think having those resources is what will enable the organization to do the deeper level of kind of community engagement that I'm confident that they want to do anyways. And that's what we're hearing the demand for kind of coming from community. Ultimately, like the concern that we're hearing is this is a really, really good idea, and we don't want this train to take off without us. That's actually a very productive energy that I hope that we're able to harness to make the project even better.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned the relationship aspect, and I think that's really important. And for me, that's why I had to pause. I didn't want and still don't want to have any alignment with any entity that may not be in deep relationship with the community as well as it could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because community is a verb, it's a practice, right? And so if we are not thoughtful and loving in the way in which we communicate with one another, you know, if we aren't taking into consideration this land bridge is going to impact multiple generations. You know, this is something that started with my great grandmother as a homeowner and, you
Right.
know, probably won't be constructed until.
And mine, absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And we both have babies
That's
now
right.
who are really going to be the ones who
That's
benefit
right.
from it. And also, if it goes in a direction that it's not supposed to, there's a potential for history to repeat itself, for there to
Yep.
be further displacement if we don't, you know, have some type of a moratorium to make sure property taxes don't go up, to make sure that people aren't displaced. And, you know, I was really excited about this because to me, this was the first time that I saw a real possibility for any type of reparations project to happen. And it's
Yep.
happening right here within the Twin Cities, right? You think about all of the generational wealth that was lost from all of these families, and the numbers are there. They know exactly how many houses were lost, exactly how many businesses were lost.
That's
And
right.
there's an opportunity to put a system in place or like a right to return policy so that, you know, my great grandmother, she's long passed on now, but there's plenty of family members who could come back. And there's so many other families like that who I think, if given the opportunity to reclaim a piece of land, to have a home that they could own, or funding to purchase a home, or funding to buy a building, I think
Yeah.
so many families would want to take advantage of that and imagine what that does for an entire community of Black people. I've never seen that before. So that's very exciting to me. But when the language is very ambiguous on if that will actually happen, right? Because Rhonda looks a little bit different than it did for our great grandparents, right? So we have to think about who our new neighbors are and who are our future residents who are coming in. There's some nuance that has to be worked out. My personal preference and hope is that because this data was built on the exploitation of Black people in Rondo, right? There was another route. There was a completely different
Without a
route that
doubt.
I-94 could have taken, or that MnDOT could have taken to place I-94, and they
Yep.
intentionally put it through this Black community, right? And
Yep.
so we know that there was an intentional harm done, and so I feel like there needs to be intentional repair done. And if
That's a
we're
basic concept. It's funny
yes,
that starts to sound controversial for some reason, but it's a very
I don't
basic
think it is.
concept. That
Yeah,
actually, that's the concept that drives our kind of legal system, right? Like,
yeah,
if there's a harm done, then something has to be done to repair that harm, or at least kind of acknowledge that harm. And we haven't done that. You know, I'll tell you, I think you're right. I'm excited for the notion of being able to say, how do we identify direct descendants of Old Rondo,
mhm,
who, like you and I, whose families, you know, lost properties and received pennies on the dollar, saw our family inheritances gutted in
mhm.
order to build that freeway there. And how do we target those families for educational opportunities, for home buying opportunities, et cetera, for business opportunities, and frankly, not just on the land bridge, because the truth is the land bridge, as you said, is about a football field. It's just not
Yeah,
big enough,
not
right?
enough.
In
Yeah,
today's dollars, I saw a study recently that suggested in today's dollars that Rondo stripped over $90 million in wealth from St. Paul's African American community. We have to know that that story played out in Oakland, and it played out in Detroit, and it played out in Cleveland, and everywhere in between.
hmm,
$90 million is just the St. Paul aspect of it. So I'm one of 11 mayors. I think we're up to 12 mayors now, actually, who founded this organization of mayors across the country committed to exploring reparations. And you know, one of the questions that people look at me and say, "Well, Minnesota outlawed slavery when the state was incorporated." The first thing we have to know is that they didn't just randomly write a law. There
yeah,
must have been some reason that they decided to write that they were outlawing slavery,
yes,
because we did have slavery in our territory before that time, and there's some evidence that we had slavery in our territory after that time. And you know, one of the most famous examples is Dred Scott, who was brought to Minnesota and subsequently sued, and that was the landmark Supreme Court case that determined that Black men have no rights which white men are bound to respect. All that to say is, whether we had the institution of slavery or not, We know that our economy has been shaped and driven by the institution of slavery. And we know that our culture has been driven. And for St. Paul, one of the most kind of vivid examples of the impacts that the legacy of slavery in America had acutely on our St. Paul community certainly is Old Rondo. So as we think about, I think you're exactly right. As we think about what St. Paul thinking down the lines of reparation, which we are doing currently, where that road likely goes really is down Old Rondo. So I'll look forward to continuing that conversation as we move forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, you know what, I believe in this project and I believe in our community even more. And so I think this is an opportunity. We've seen, okay, there's varying levels of communication happening and different needs and wants. But to your point, I don't think that anyone is necessarily asking for something different. It's just a matter of how do we make sure that everyone's needs are met and that everyone has a seat at the table where they're not just sitting there and being told what's going to happen, but they get to voice their opinions and insert their brilliance into this huge development opportunity. So I am.
That's right. And that's so and that's how we've centered our campaign, and not our campaign, our whole administration, from the campaign through like our time in office. And it's this notion of equity. We talk about equity and we drive equity and we're passionate about equity. We fly the equity flag a lot, but a lot of times we don't really know what it means. In our social justice world, the term equity takes on a pretty amorphous shape sometimes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a fire truck on pass. My background in undergrad is in business administration. And when my business school dean said the word equity, she meant it as a money word, right? She was talking about ownership.
Yeah.
She was talking about decision-making power. And she was talking about participation in an economy. That is, if I own equity in a company that had a good quarter, then I had a good quarter too, because I get to participate in that economy. That's what's broken. So our whole drive toward equity is about ensuring that everybody in our Rondo community, in every neighborhood in our city, knows that they are owners of our city. They're owners stakeholders in what goes on in City Hall. That because they're owners, they get a part of a decision-making process. This is why, Brittany, when I got elected, instead of like naming a transition team, we brought together hundreds of St. Paul residents to name who my cabinet would be. This is exactly why when we do our budgeting, whether it's American Rescue Plan dollars with $166 million we're getting from the Biden administration, or our just annual budget process, we always do it through what we call a community-based budgeting process. This is why, as we talk about reimagining public safety, in the first 100 days of my administration, before George Floyd was murdered, we said we're going to completely rewrite the use of force policies that govern our police department. And it's why the city of St. Paul is the first law enforcement agency I'm aware of on the planet that rewrote their use of force policies through a two-way, 2-month-long conversation with community members to say, what should this covenant be? And so that's exactly what we're committed to. I think our administration, I think our city has really rewritten the playbook in many, many ways around kind of how people engage with their governance. We get calls all the time from other cities saying, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? We want to copy that. And we're proud of that. We think that's St. Paul in our rightful position.
Exactly.
If other cities are copying us, then
take notes.
We ought to be doing it.
You're doing what you're supposed to do. As you should. Well, even as it relates to equity and like the distribution of resources that come from the city, how then do you decide who deserves what allocation? You know, because that's part of the question even about RCR is how do they get this much money with, you know, X amount of engagement that's happened? So what is the measurement or the tool for deciding who should get what?
Well, there's obviously a number of different pots. And so some of those resources come from the state and the federal government, which I'd love to control how they give money, but we don't. And I would, though, if they gave me the chance. We can't. And then but within the city, we have different resources, STAR grants and, you know, capital improvement budgets and things like that, that are mostly all driven by some community-based board, right? So we have STAR funding, right, which is sales tax funding that goes back to places that's for reinvestment in our community. We have a STAR board who brings the recommendations to me and to the city council on how those should be invested. our capital improvement committee, it's called our CIB, same thing. We have a committee that determines and makes recommendations to the city council and to the mayor. And this is one of the reasons, Brittany, that one of the focuses of our administration has not just been on saying, oh, I'm the mayor, look at me, whatever, but it's been saying we govern the city through not just the city council, but through this kind of network of task forces and commissions that oftentimes bring the type of recommendations that you're just describing to the city council and to the mayor, and we end up reacting to those recommendations. And one of the things that's absolutely critical, we've been working to help diversify those task forces and commissions, because if nobody from Old Rondo is on that task force, then they won't maybe necessarily be able to fully value what a big and important concept this is and how important it is that it's connected to the community in those ways. And so that's one of the things that I would encourage any of your viewers who are St. Paul residents, Rondo residents, East Side residents to get engaged, get involved, check out the mayor's office website. Literally anything you're interested in, from bicycles to aging in place, we have a task force or a commission about. And we welcome you to apply and kind of be a part of that service.
Absolutely. And speaking of residents of St. Paul, you've been talking about reparations for ADOS people within the city of St. Paul. So what exactly is the vision? How does that work?
We don't know yet. We're putting it together. We've got a commission that's working to help us kind of build that big vision. And I'm excited about that. So we don't really know yet what specifically that looks like in St. Paul. But I'll tell you, we're fortunate that, we started this conversation around, I think, college savings accounts and around, and so we're starting to think about, I think, differently in St. Paul about what the city budget is for and how we as a city can use our resources to help families. And it's been kind of an epiphany for me that cities sort of, typically speaking, sort of invest to create the environment in which people can succeed if they have the ability to take advantage of that environment, as opposed to really saying we're going to help you, right? I see you're having some, and so we've shifted our focus in that way. I told you about college savings accounts, raising the minimum wage is about that. Our guaranteed income pilot is about that. Eliminating late fines in our libraries is about that, right? And so we've already, I think the conversation we're having around reparations is an extension of the conversation we had around the bridge fund this time last year, where we took millions of dollars and said, we're just going to send it out the door to help families who are struggling to pay the rent and struggling to put food on the table in a pandemic. It's a direct extension, I think, of a lot of those conversations that we've already had, which is, I think, one of the reasons why our community members are up for the challenge.
Okay. And so it's an extension, but it does center African descendants of enslaved people. Is that correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
So okay. Just because I know, there are a lot of people who can benefit from so many of the initiatives that you're doing. And also, I think it still matters to have those culturally specific things and to name. There was a particular, similar to what's happening in Rondo, there was a particular group of people, the African descendants of slaves, who have been historically disenfranchised. And so there's a moment that we're in right now where I think people are waking up and they're seeing, because of our public safety issues, there are a myriad of ways in which Black people are experiencing harm. And the fact that as a mayor that you're open to that the city council has, this commission and we've had Councilmember Prince on and Traherne and some other folks, to really talk about what this could look like. And we're definitely excited to hear more and to see what this looks like in practice. Speaking of public safety issues, I'm curious on, based on what's happened in the city of St. Paul as well as in Minneapolis, are you open to the Department of Justice opening a patterns and practices investigation just to make sure that the city of St. Paul and their police department is operating with integrity as they should?
I'll tell you, I'm open to every level of transparency and accountability. And I'll tell you, it's because I have the confidence in the work that we're doing that our work can be subject to transparency and accountability. I already mentioned to you our work to rebuild our use of force policies back when I first took office. I know some of your viewers will probably remember I was in the news, I think my second year in office, because we put our K-9 unit on pause after we had a series of accidental bites in which members of our community who were not suspects in any crime
Right.
were accidentally bit by police dogs. And we said, wait, we have to completely rethink how, and the world got mad at me because we didn't have a police dog demonstration at the state.
Well, you know they love their dogs.
What'd you say?
You know they love dogs. Come on.
You know what? Listen, and what I've told some folks is, listen, we will not accept unarmed, innocent, on their way to work, members of our community having their lives changed, and having their legs mauled, and having their, being mauled by dogs accidentally as a tax against just having a canine unit.
Also some historical trauma in there with our relationship.
A lot of historical trauma. Our former chief, Bill Finney, led this audit for us. It brought us back a series of recommendations, which we've implemented. And I'll tell you, we haven't heard any more about accidental bites in St. Paul as a result of that conversation. And so we're doing those things. Thankfully, we have a chief, I think, I'd say the last several chiefs who have been committed to kind of community relations in St. Paul. I think we have a different foundational relationship than other cities in Minnesota and other cities across the country to be able to kind of push that forward. One of the things that I reflect on is the fact that the last at least 3 or 4 times that we've selected a new chief in St. Paul, our local civil rights organizations have stepped forward and said, we want an internal candidate, somebody who comes from Minneapolis or New York or somewhere else around the country, may not understand the relationships, may not understand this culture that we've created. I don't know how many large cities could say that. We may be the only one. That's not to say we don't have work to do. And so we're building out what I call, Brittany, our community first public safety framework. This is a framework that thousands of St. Paul residents have provided input on over the last 4 years. And I think it's really exciting. It starts with having those police officers and first responders who can help us out in our kind of most kind of horrific moments. But then it moves on to a quick recognition that, most of the time when people call 911, it's not because there's some issue of crime or violence going on in the community. It's because we have like some concern, right? Somebody's in crisis. And a lot of those things, whether it's a dog barking or a homeless person asleep on a bench, a lot of those things don't really lend themselves to the traditional law enforcement toolkit. So we spend a lot of time and money sending police officers to go to a scene that they really don't really have the tools to cure. And it keeps us stuck in some of those cycles. So what we're building is a system of alternative and co-response to say we can identify social workers to help connect individuals to our kind of supportive infrastructure to hopefully get them out of the cycles that keep them calling 911 in the first place. The other side of this, though, is you and I both have children. And when we talk about keeping people safe who we love, right? In America, our public safety framework is all about police, prisons, and prosecutors, which is all about what happens after something horrific happens. When we talk about keeping someone safe who we love, whose face that we can see when we close our eyes, whose name that we know, who we kiss goodnight at the end of the day, if I were to tell you that our plan to keep your child safe was to make sure that somebody goes to jail after they do something wrong to that child, you'd find that you'd have a problem with that, right? And so all that to say is, our public safety framework also includes, and I think this is critical, proactive investments in our highest potential neighbors and our highest potential neighborhoods to help reduce the likelihood that something terrible will happen in the first place. Research shows that people who know what they're going to feed their children, who know where they're going to sleep tonight, and who are connected to community and can ask a neighbor for a cup of sugar are less likely to become an offender or a victim. Research shows that neighborhoods and places that are well designed, well kept, well maintained, that have clear sight lines, that are well lit, et cetera, can actually limit opportunities for crime through environmental design. Those are the types of things, those are the types of investments that we have not made historically in our community. And our this comprehensive public safety framework that we're building out, that you'll see us kind of continue to push on in the next couple of weeks, the next phase is coming about, I think a really exciting opportunity for us to reimagine what public safety means from the ground up in a way, frankly, that isn't about police or no police. It's about public safety, or once we're having a public safety conversation that's actually centered around a data-driven, outcome-based, coordinated approach to actually making our neighborhoods safer. So that's what's exciting me right now.
Well, that is very exciting. And you mentioned families, and I have to give a major shout out to your wife. I don't know if she's watching right now or not. She's one of my favorite people of all time. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but when I was pregnant with my daughter, she was providing my prenatal care. I
I
don't know if
didn't know that.
Yes, I usually, of course, HIPAA, she couldn't tell you, but
Yes.
yes, she provided my prenatal care and did a phenomenal job. And so when I moved across the country at 7.5 months pregnant,
Wow.
I had a standard of care. I felt protected. I felt safe. I could ask the questions that I needed to. And then I got into a space where that experience was not the same. And she really set the framework for me. And now I do a ton of work in Black maternal health. She set a framework for me on the standard of care that Black women should be receiving. And when you look at the data of Black women being 3 to 5 times more likely to die or be severely injured
That's
from
right.
childbirth and related injuries, I have to think of Miss Futrell Carter, who made sure that I was protected and really showed me what it is like to just be cared for and to have people who work in a medical system that has been historically biased against Black women since its inception, especially obstetrics and gynecology. And I got to see that there's a better way and it's possible. I'm wondering for you, who's also a new dad, again,
That's
congratulations,
right.
you all have a new baby. What was that experience like being there and going through bringing a child into the world? It's scary being a Black woman birthing today.
It really, well, one, thank you. My wife is one of the most incredible people I've ever known. I
Agreed.
hear some of the stories. She obviously can't tell me who her patients are, so
Yeah.
I actually didn't even know that. That's hilarious.
Yes.
Um, but I do hear some of the stories of the way she goes above and beyond for her patients because she sees herself in you, and she sees
Mhm.
herself in so many of the patients that she sees, and it's incredible to see that. And it's also, to your point, I think disappointing that, relatively speaking, so few of our community members are able
It's
to
really
access
sad.
healthcare providers who look like them and who they feel like I really relate to kind of on a
Mhm.
direct basis. And then the same as everything else, that impacts the quality of healthcare that we can receive. That impacts our ability to feel like we can trust and we can really kind of, that we can really take these messages seriously. We're seeing that play out right now in this COVID crisis, right? Where we
Yeah.
know that we have to make sure that the members of our community, knowing how serious this is, hearing these messages, hearing them from people who they trust and who they relate to, is a matter of life and death, not just for them, but for all of us, right? I think is absolutely critical. So our youngest, Amila, was born right kind of at the outset of the COVID crisis, right?
Yeah.
And so, she's 16, 17 months now. We're like reintroducing her to people who she's known on the screen for a year
Right.
through Zoom or through kind of teleconferences. Is just getting used to the fact that other people exist in the world, and it's hilarious. I think she's having a blast just exploring all the different kind of people who she's getting to kind of see. But I
Yeah.
think if nothing else, it really recenters you. You know,
Yes.
children make clear what's important, both
Yes.
on an individual level and on a community level. And so, as we think about the young people in our community who are the older young people who she'll look up to and want to be like, it's our
Mhm.
responsibility to make sure they have some opportunity and they can feel hopeful about their future, right?
Mm.
As we look at the children who she'll be in kindergarten with, it's our opportunity, our job as a community to make sure that those children are coming in school stable and ready to learn. And
Mhm.
I think if nothing else, it sort of just recenters us. It's another recentering thing. You serve a community that you grew up in, and there's a lot of recentering things from the
Yes.
senior citizens who still know me as Little Melvin because I'm named after my dad and my
Yeah.
grandfather,
Yeah.
to my own daughter being in community. It's another one of those kind of centering factors that keeps you focused on the work.
Absolutely. And I think you all have done a really great job of making sure that as much of the amazing policy work that you're doing and the change making that you're doing in community, you still center family. We see pictures of you just being a dad and doing normal things. And I think that matters, one, as an elected official, as a Black man, to say that, yes, I have my career and I have lots of things that I'm responsible to, but I am nothing if I am not responsible to them first.
That's right. Well, and here's the thing. I'm a resident. I'm a dad. I'm a parent in our schools. And if I take off all of those hats to be the mayor, then I won't be able to serve residents, dads, parents of our schools, African American families, working families. I won't be able to serve them as well. And so,
Right.
it's an intriguing journey to bring my whole self into this work in that way. I'll tell you one of the things that I've learned in the last year, for example, I've got a jogging stroller. I can mount my phone on the handlebar and have a Zoom meeting while I go for a 5-mile run. I would
Yeah.
have known that a year and a half ago. But like, she's really challenging me to continue to rethink what work-life balance means and how we do both things, sometimes at the same time,
Yep.
but in ways that are serving her. Because children will get served first, whether you like it or not.
Whether yes, they don't care about eating.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I had to go downstairs for this conversation because she'd be grabbing the computer and grabbing.
Yep. And I had to come up because mine is downstairs. So I
You know what it is.
I get it. I get it. Well, so we have these little ones who are one day going to grow up and go to college and do amazing things in the world.
Right.
You're a graduate of FAMU and also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. I'm a graduate of UM, but I'm a Zeta Phi Beta, member. Why do you think it's so important for Black leaders to have these experiences of being immersed in Black culture, whether it's at an HBCU or within a Black Greek letter organization?
I think it's a beautiful. I'll tell you, it was amazing for me. I went to Florida A&M University, and
yes, yeah.
What'd you say?
No, I wanted to make sure it was FAMU. I want to make sure I got it right. Yes,
absolutely. Oh, I would have corrected you.
Okay, I figured. You guys are very proud of your school.
Yes, I went to Florida A&M University, which we all know is one of the largest and livest of the historically Black colleges on the planet. It was this immersion experience where we were immersed in just some of the most incredible people on the planet. I'll tell you, in high school growing up and in grad school, and I came back to Minnesota for grad school, I met people who were amazing minds, but too often the people who I wanted to hang out with on a Monday morning for class were not the same group of people who I was looking for on the weekend, right? And one of the most beautiful things I think about Florida, I got down there and there was these two twins in my dorm. They're from Atlanta. They're in ROTC. I'll never forget them. And, the way, people put on their, military uniforms, they suddenly stand up straighter and walk. These guys would put on their military uniforms and be, kind of just the coolest swag, everything. And they're just these guys who we just were buddies with instantly for my first year in school. We were out there playing spades one night outside the dorm. We stayed up all night long playing spades, Brittany. And about 6:30 in the morning, they looked up and went, "Oh my God, we got to go get to calculus 2, right?" And I was just like, I love this. I was just like,
I love it here.
This is right. Like, this is home for me. And so I think having that space, being immersed. I tell everybody who's interested in going to historically Black college, the great thing about Harvard is if you go to Harvard, you have access to Harvard's global network. But the great thing about Florida A&M is if you go to Florida A&M, you have access to the whole HBCU expanded global network that includes Howard, that includes Morehouse and Spelman and everything in Atlanta, that includes all of these organizations, all these universities on the planet, and that's actually a bigger, more profound network, right? I'm an Alpha, but if a resume for a Zeta comes across my desk, right,
exactly.
It means something to me.
Yes.
Right? And I have the ability to tap into this kind of broader network. And I think that's really important because when we excel in politics or in business or in whatever, in sports or whatever, as Simone Biles showed us yesterday, it can be very isolating. And it can be an isolating experience. Simone Biles did I was looking at how she doesn't train by herself as a lot of elite athletes do. She has this team that she's built around herself that she trains with. And it happens to be these 3 other young African-American women who she created opportunity for, but also surrounded herself with this team that can help prop her up. That's the way that we do this. That's the way that this all works. No matter what it is, whether it's running for mayor or being an Olympic gymnast, all of life is a team sport, and you have to have your team. And I think that's, I just got it. My broader team was very well supplemented and expanded globally through those experiences, both going to a historically Black college and pledging a historically African-American fraternity in ways that I wouldn't be me without those experiences.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for us to name, no matter where we matriculate to in life, it's those cultural experiences that really do shape us, and we don't have to leave them behind when we get into these spaces. I know we're at time, so I'll ask you this last question before we go. The night that you were elected, I recall your celebration. We took a picture together. Actually,
Yes.
the moment you found out you were mayor, we were taking a picture. So that was a moment. And immediately after, you went to go, you said some things and you went to go celebrate with your wife. And your celebration song was Mr. Carter, Lil Wayne and Jay-Z from the Carter Three, which I get it. You're the Carter Three as well.
Right.
I see it. So if you were to be reelected, what song do you want to celebrate to this time?
What song would it be? That's a good question. I should have been warned about this question.
I sent the agenda. I tried to give you notice.
I have no idea. Maybe I'm just shooting from the hip here. Maybe Ain't No Stopping Us Now. We doubling down on all of this.
Okay. Yeah, because there is no stopping. Well, you have shown that despite what you face on the campaign trail or while you're in the office, that you really do move through those barriers with grace and love and compassion for your community. So again, we say thank you to you, to your amazing wife, Sakina, to the whole team who helped orchestrate this and made sure that we could get you here. We are so just thankful to have someone who looks like us and represents us and serves us. So thank you again for all that you do. Enjoy the rest of your day and come back and talk to us again.
Without a doubt. Thanks for having me on,
For sure. Thank you. And make sure you call me next time you need a DJ. It's been a minute.
Will do. Definitely will do.
It's been a minute. So, all right. Take care, Mayor Carter. Thank you so much.
All right. Take it easy.
All right.